Thank you for tuning in to Movie Geeks United. From sword and sandal epics to ambitious science fiction, Ridley Scott is one of the most visionary and prolific cinematic artists of the past 5 decades. His immense body of work is explored in the recent biography from Vincent LoBrutto titled Ridley Scott, a Biography. I last spoke with Vinny 10 years ago. He was one of our first guests on our ongoing The Kubrick series. Even then, he mentioned that he was eager to begin a book on Scott. We were pleased to reconnect with Vinny after all these years to discuss the work of his latest director obsession.
The challenges were immense. You know, when I did the book on Stanley Kubrick, you know, there was like nothing out there. Practically, whatever was out there, meaning there really was no real biographies. There was one, but it wasn't out yet. And there just was no information to speak of, and I had to, step by step find it. With Ridley Scott, there were a number of books with no biographies. You know, one of the problems in writing a biography when you're, with the source material that's already published, is you really don't know. You do your best to check it, but you really don't know, whether it's accurate or not. And to a certain extent, you go back and forth. They say, you have to get at least like 3 sources, 2 sources that match up. So I wrote him as I always do. You're supposed to let people know at least that you're writing a book. And in his case, I said if he had time, I'd like to, to talk to him. And I got a message back from his agent. It said he would love to talk to you, but he's always busy, and if he can, he can. Of course, I never heard from him because he was so busy. So to answer your question directly, the hardest part was like the first 2 or 3 chapters in the book. I mean, there was like nothing about, nothing to speak of depth of his background, where he came from, what the area was like, what his parents were like, all those kind of details. And my wife, Harriet Morrison, works with me, on research and stuff. And she was digging, I was digging, and we really had to piece it together. And then once you piece it together, then you go over it and over it and over it and over it until it has a prose feel. That to me, the thing I'm most I'm proud of the whole book, but I'm most proud of the first 2 or 3 chapters. So that was the major challenge. The other challenge was I sort of started out thinking, I don't know if we talked about this 10 years ago, but thinking who else was a Kubrick? After you do Stanley Kubrick, you want to do people that are really meet up to a standard. And I always thought that Ridley Scott was one of them. There were other people, it's so long ago. James Cameron was one in terms of the technical chops of Kubrick, but not gravitas.
Right.
Michael Mann, Terrence Malick, one could argue this, but I thought that Ridley Scott, first of all, they apparently had met. I don't know how close they were. And, when Ridley Scott did his first film, The Duelist, he studied Barry Lyndon left and right. I mean, it is Barry Lyndon, in a sense. So those were the major challenges. And the last one was, this is a confession. I hadn't seen every one of his films when I signed on to do it. I had seen, enough that I knew, I knew what a great filmmaker he was. But, nobody makes films one after another. Kubrick did. I thought people would argue that some of Kubrick's films are not great. I would argue against that. But eventually I started to realize that there were films that, were not as great as I thought. And those were hard to deal with. On the other hand, there were movies that I had seen but didn't know a lot about, like American Gangster, which I think is a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's interesting, but that correlation between Kubrick and Scott, the way I see it, they both have a distinctive style, and they've both pushed the medium, or at least certain genre filmmaking, forward in a big way. And of course that the Shining connection, with Kubrick using his footage from Blade Runner for The Shining, which seems remarkable.
It is. Well, I tell you, you laugh. I was rolling on the floor when I heard it, because it didn't make sense. I mean, they must have been very good friends, because Kubrick didn't let anybody see anything, let alone lend it to them. But but it was like background footage. So maybe he felt that wasn't a big a deal, but everything was a big deal to Kubrick. But there are all those connections. To finish this thing about the gravitas, is that I think Ridley Scott has about as much gravitas as you can. I mean, obviously I put Kubrick on a very high standard with Wells and a few other filmmakers. Not everybody agrees with me, but I think most people do. But Ridley Scott's films, I think, have maybe not the same kind of gravitas. He also has made a lot of films. Kubrick made 13.
Right.
In 50 years? Yeah. So
but
you make a lot of...
There is a big difference, too, between the working styles, because I've often heard Ridley talk about, I'm not an 80 taker. I don't do 50 or 80 takes of much of anything. So he's very efficient with his time, Ridley is.
Right. It's also, I fell in love with two things, with a million things, but two things with Ridley Scott. The Ridleygram, which is a storyboard. And Kubrick was a photographer. Ridley Scott was a painter. The other thing is, I think I call it in the book something like floating fluff. That for texture, he often has like things. It could be snow, it could be dust. Those are very unique. But he is very efficient. The methodology, there are similarities, as you say, but a lot of differences. Yeah,
and that floaty. You see those kind of floating particles in something like Legend, and then you see the smoke. He has his films, and Tony to an extent had the same kind of feel to us, some kind of like gauzy kind of look to their films.
Yeah, being brothers, one of the painful things about the passing is that they talk to each other either on the phone or in person every day of their lives. Where Tony is completely different. He's like, he calls his films rock and roll,
Yeah.
but yeah, so the point is that because they're brothers, and he was an older brother, he looked up to him. There was some exchange of ideas and using certain techniques.
Yeah, and with Ridley, it's just the strength of his eye, and I think early on, as he started an arts education, he really gravitated towards graphic design, right?
Commercials, production design, probably some graphic design early on in art school. Yeah, this is a guy of a lot of talents, Probably he hits more areas than almost any filmmaker I know of.
Yeah.
And it shows in the films. Yeah, and he worked for the BBC. It's a long, another overnight success. 40 years old, first film.
Right.
40. It's amazing.
Well, he paid his dues. During that time, he made thousands of commercials. That's training right there.
And I don't think I found every one, but I found like the Hovis one is very famous. You could look that up if it's still on the net. And the thing is, everybody thinks of Wells and Spielberg, all these guys that started real young. There were other, I could name, one other major filmmaker. I don't do films, directors who don't speak English or in English-speaking films because I don't speak the language. And I'm Italian-American, but I'm not Italian. Michelangelo Antonioni, 40 years old. Started at 40 years old.
Oh, did he really? I wasn't aware of that. I just did a big show on Zabriskie Point by Antonioni. Yeah, he's a
That's
filmmaker.
not a bad film. A lot of people trashed it. I mean, I saw it, when it first came out, first run theater. I was a little disappointed, but as time goes on, I really, really like it a lot.
I do too. Ridley, I mean, you mentioned he was 40 when he got his chance to do his directorial debut with The Duelist. It's interesting to me how, and he admits this freely, is that it took him some time to kind of master how to converse with an actor.
Yeah, he was not too good with actors. He yelled at them, or he either said nothing, or he yelled and screamed a lot, and then he worked that out. If I could say something quickly about The Duelist.
Sure.
When you go to, back in the day, I'm 70 years old now, right? So that whole 70s period, before and after, I saw movies first run. So I go to see this movie. I went to see everything. So I went to see this movie, The Duelist. That sounds interesting. I didn't know that much about Conrad. I didn't even know it was based on Conrad. I'm watching the movie. I'm saying, this guy, I'm going to use the word you just used. This guy's got some eye. What an eye. And, the only thing I was a little concerned about was Harvey Keitel. Him being believable, the accent. And, of course, now doing the research, I understand. But anyway, when it was over, and I said, Ridley Scott. I think I said something like, you're going to hear from this guy, or I can't wait to see his next film.
Yeah.
But that, as much as one could chuckle at that, not that you're chuckling, but, this happens all the time. I saw Mean Streets, they had to pick me up off the floor. But The Duelist is a handsome film. Oh, God. And not easy to make. None of them are easy. They shot some of the fencing scenes in Ridley's hotel room.
Wow. We talk about his distinctive style, which certainly comes from his design and commercial work, but he got some criticism for that. Some people felt that The Duelist was just a kind of an empty exercise in style.
Well, this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, in the sense that what attracted me to him is the eye. Kubrick also. But, nobody makes films just for the eye. Really, if they're there, I don't know who they are. But you still got to tell a story. You still got to work with actors. You still have themes. But I think what happens is a lot of people who say things like this don't understand visual language. I've spent my whole career, I've done books on the crafts, cinematography, sound, editing, production design. How do they tell a story? And they all do. So, and also he grew, as we say, as time went on. But he got, I'm not so sure the reviews have gotten that much better, a little bit, But they always throw in, the eye part, eye candy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, as if movies should not look good.
What is cinematic? What does cinematic mean? Right, exactly. And, we can sit here and name films that don't necessarily look, spectacular, but are good. But I wouldn't want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Movies should be movies. Right.
And in order to grow, I mean, you could see it by looking at the range of his career. He seems to be really interested in exploring different genres, stretching himself in that way, telling totally unique stories.
Yeah, he, in a sense, I mean, that's another connection, I think, with Kubrick, is that, what he does with genres, he sort of reinvents them. Again, American Gangster is a gangster movie, but it's, it's a gangster epic. Every one of them, I think, actually, the thing that's most interesting to me is the whole scientific, the whole sci-fi thing, because he announced several times that he didn't like science fiction, he was the right guy, and he continues to make them. And it can't be because of the money. Can't be only because of the money. And mainly because, yes, he has money, but that's not why people make films necessarily at that level. They're good, and he keeps evolving them. So I think what he's done for science fiction is, his biggest contribution.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
No, you did. You did. And
Good.
just the range of his career in terms of, I mean, he's done comedy with something like Matchstick Men. He's done these sword and sandal epics. He did Thumb and Louise, film noir. I mean, he's really pushed himself into different areas. But
it's funny, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Matchstick Men is one of my favorites, and it is. You're right. It is categorized as a comedy, but it's really more of a dramedy. In fact, the writers, I think, sort of thought that it was a dramedy. But you're right that he's always, he's always reinventing the genres and finding ways to do it. And for the amount of films that he's done, it really is amazing.
Well, let me talk about because you mentioned sci-fi, and I know a lot of people categorize Alien as sci-fi, but really I think it falls into more of the horror camp, even though those two kind of straddle each other.
He calls it a beast movie.
Yeah. He really, it doesn't look like any other kind of space movies. I mean, once again, his eye and his attention to set production and that sort of thing.
The sets in his films are really amazing. And what he did as a production designer really was for television, for the BBC. But he's worked with some of the best, and I've had the I've been able to talk to some of them over the years. The one I wanted to jump in is, remember I talked about that one of the problems in doing a book with a lot of films, especially if you haven't seen them all, is I never saw a good year.
Right, the Russell Crowe kind of more romantic kind of movie, yeah.
Now, one of the reasons he did it is he has a house in that region of France. So that was part of the reasons. I don't want to go too far afield, but I don't like that film too much.
Yeah.
No matter how many times I saw it. And, when you write up, you're doing chapter after chapter, you try to give everything. I mean, the chapter on Alien is long, on Blade Runner is long. So when I got to a good year, it was longish. But eventually I cut it down because I didn't think it was, it was important to include it, but I didn't think it was worthy. And maybe it's because it's something that he did, like, in between movies. Mm-hmm. Have you seen it? Have you seen The Good Year?
I saw it maybe a year after it came out, maybe 2009. I don't know what year it is, but it came out. But I did see it a few months after it did come out. And there
are certainly good things in it. The little girl is great. The little boy is great.
Yeah.
Finney and the love interest. Russell is not the best comedian, in my view. What is my view? So what is
but when he made films in Europe and other areas overseas, he I think there's a rule against it in America. But he would operate the camera himself, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Now this is an interesting subject because he was such a good cameraman. He wanted to shoot all his films. But it's a bit of a problem. Kubrick did all the handheld work, but Ridley could shoot the whole. Would want to shoot the whole film. So eventually, he did do. He had to pull some strings and talk to people, and they finally gave him permission. But eventually, he did. It was interesting because he used to stand behind the camera like the old timers. But then it got to the point where he was using 8, 10, 20 cameras. So he would sit behind monitors. But yeah, he was, it is, how can he be any different now? He's a great cameraman and did do that. And then worked with a lot of cameramen, sometimes for long lengths of time, sometimes people who had worked with him on commercials.
Mm. Yeah, and a few months ago I talked to Tom Skerritt, and I asked him about Ridley, and he said in terms of the camera work, first of all, it helped to feel like he was right in there with them.
That's right.
Operating the camera on his own, and then also the sets. I mean, to walk into that environment, I mean, he said, a lot of that work was already done for you to make it kind of a believable existence.
You can move in,
Yeah,
I mean,
not that you'd want to.
they are not Alien, that's for sure. I love Alien. I mean, Alien has that structure of Agatha Christie, and then there were none kind of thing. This gets a little racy, I guess, but when I first saw it, the end with Sigourney Weaver, where she takes off her, her suit, that was considered like the scariest, sexiest thing in movies.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see why.
She sort of had a hard time with him over the years, but she continued to work with him. Like I say, he's come a long way. There are actors that love him, and so some people that found him at the time a little rough. Like Mimi Rogers, talks about sort of Watch Over Me, which another film that I love and a lot of people don't like.
I just rewatched Someone Watch Over Me last night because I thought to myself, well, let me see a Ridley Scott film since I'm talking to Vinny tomorrow, and that's the one I chose. And I think it's just it's a beautiful kind of new film noir. It's just got
Talk about a time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's got a beautiful sheen to it. I love that movie.
And it's got that theme we all love, two worlds. This guy's going back for two worlds. And everybody is good. Berenger is good at it. Lorraine Bracco was great at it. The kid was great.
Yeah, yeah.
And the villain, boy, is that guy scared.
Well, and it feels like a movie that, because we talked earlier about his difficulty working with actors, and it feels like a movie where he got rid of the spectacle and he wanted to do a more intimate character film. And I'm telling you, the relationship that Berenger and Bracco have in that movie feels so authentic.
It really does. It's interesting because she's like, what they call, a pro, a Queens type, Brooklyn type girl, and a really solid person. And he also has that quality, but yet he's believable that a very rich New York City lady would want to get into a relationship with him. And if you notice, you just saw it. I haven't seen it in a while, but the New York City is shot beautiful. Lights and all kinds of you always have lights, but the way the lighting is designed, and the scenes with Bracco are not prettified. They're not beautified. They're shot reasonably straight. Am I right? I haven't seen it in a while.
I think so too, and she shot a lot in. I mean, her world is much darker than Berenger's. It seems. I mean, it's more kind of dimly lit, but those contrasts are so beautiful, and those contrasts announce themselves just in the opening credit sequence because there's this great probing helicopter shot up to the what is that building? The Chrysler building, and then it kind of pans over from the bright lights and glamour of that into Berenger's neighborhood. So those contrasts announce themselves right at the beginning, and it's a great thing.
When it first came out, that opening shot, people said, "What?" I mean, I've seen the helicopter shots before, the Chrysler building, but part of it is also being from England, and he spent some time in New York in the '60s. But he has this, again, the eye, he knows how to interpret these different worlds. And see, the other thing is, if you look at his filmography, there's a lot of movies, as I've been saying, and you look at the years, Kubrick, every 8 years, 10 years, it's not a criticism, but Ridley goes one after another practically.
He does, yeah. So it's bound to be, there's bound to be some kind of speed bumps along the way when you have that kind of output. But
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's true. And it's also, you can't read a director's mind. The way Ridley works, Kubrick, pretty much when he finished, then he said, okay, what am I going to do next? He sometimes had an idea, but Ridley has, at any one point, he has a whole group of films that okay, how ready is this? Is this ready to go? We'll go with that. That kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, but to him, I'm sure that all the films, I don't know if he thinks all as good as others, but I think, he loves them all. Why not? Why would he make them?
Right. Well, I think there's such kind of a snobbiness among the kind of intelligentsia out there about some of these movies, but this is a guy that made 2,000 commercials. He clearly has a work ethic. He likes to practice his craft. So that's what he does. He practices it as often as he can. And for people to begrudge him that, it's like any other job.
There's one thing that they can't argue. The greatest commercial ever made is just numbers. 1984.
That's right.
Have you seen it?
The Macintosh ad that he did.
Macintosh,
Yeah.
I've seen it hundreds of times by now. And, it amazes me that in terms of color palette, it has a certain color palette, really grim. Then this blonde woman in red shorts comes running out and bashes the thing. This is the other theme of Ridley loves strong women.
Yeah.
His mom was strong. His wife is strong. And, and that's in all of them. But that commercial, nobody could top. Nobody ever will top it.
Yeah, it was a game changer. And that was a wise choice to go with him, because they were promoting something they hoped would be a game-changing product. So, and hey, it turned out to be.
He claims that he didn't know it was about computers.
Really?
I don't know if I believe that, but it doesn't really matter. It also was a long-form commercial, that was new.
It had elements of like Metropolis in there, and it was stunning. Yeah.
No CGI.
Yeah, and talking about CGI, I mean, I actually really loved the second Blade Runner film, but but when I watched it, I imagined Ridley doing his Blade Runner and having to do everything practical, and it's just a stunning achievement, his Blade Runner from 1982. When you're writing about movies like Alien and movies like Blade Runner, movies that have been explored ad nauseum over the years, is it challenging to find a new bent on it?
It always is, and I love the new Blade Runner. They picked the right person, and actually, I saw it with my wife, and she didn't like it very much. And I said, this film was almost avant-garde. I mean. Yeah. It wasn't difficult to follow, but you had to really, think and move and go on with it. Just another quick aside, when you're doing a book, with Kubrick, he was going to do one more film when I started the book, and then he passed. With Ridley, I had to keep up, since I started it, and I'm talking to you from Hillsdale, New York. And when the Getty film, what about Getty's...
All the Money in the World, yeah.
Thank you. It didn't open too wide, and we found out where it was here, and Harriet said, I think I know how to get this. So we're driving. She said, don't get mad at me. She said, we're going the wrong way. I said, don't go over the speed limit. Would you believe it if I told you we got there 2 seconds before it started? It was like an old theater that Roosevelt used to go to. I liked that movie, actually. I thought, with all the, at that point in the writing, to have to deal with Me Too and all that was painful,
Well, and it's another example of just how damn efficient he is, because weeks before opening, he recasts a star actor and reshoots all of that. It's just incredible, unheard of.
And he puts in the person that he wanted that the studio didn't want, and they could have done a lot of things. They could have just shelved it, and he sat down and he said, you know what? These people have been working so hard on this from all the other people.
Yeah. And
he said it's really not fair. We're going to go ahead, and he told the studio. They said, listen, man. If you were anybody other than Ridley Scott, I'd say you can't do it, but you could do it. They did it during Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
And he served them Thanksgiving dinner. But I think that that film is very complex. At first, my first reaction is, what do they want to do that story for? See what happens when you're older. You say, I know that, I know that, but young audiences don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating story. Getty was a really, I don't know, I don't know what word to use. He was a tough guy.
Yeah, very much so.
And the kid was good, I thought. Everybody, Michelle was good, Michelle Williams, everybody was good. But the look was great.
Yeah, it was. But when he makes something like Alien and Blade Runner back to back, two distinctive movies that really push forward the film art, he had to have had a period of time where he had to resist typecasting.
Yeah. That's a very good point. He uses, very good actors. And Blade Runner, as you know, was really tough. Cronenweth, who, rest in peace, was one of the great cameramen, George Cronenweth, and they did not get along. The crew didn't like the Brits. The Brits, it was really a nightmare, and he just kept moving on. The actors didn't totally get together, but he manages to have a consistency. But what you're saying about back to back, it's one thing if you do, a medium weight film and then a lightweight film, mm-hmm. or a heavy film and then a light, right? To do two classics. I mean, my three favorite. Can we do a three favorite thing?
Sure.
You ready?
Please.
Blade Runner, Alien, and American Gangster. Your three.
Of Ridley's,
I
mean, you can't avoid Alien and Blade Runner. You just can't.
Right.
So they would have to be on my list too. I'll have to think about the third one because I
I'll put you on the spot.
I like so many of his films.
No, I know. See, the thing is, like the third movie of anybody, I don't mean to put you on the spot. The third choice of anybody's film could be surprising. It could be Robin Hood.
That's right. Yeah.
I wouldn't think so, but it could be,
Well, I also rewatched Thelma and Louise a few weeks ago, and I was reminded just about of how powerful that movie is, how much it works.
That's another masterpiece.
I think so too.
And for a man to make a woman's film, I mean, it used to happen all the time, but this is done in modern time, and it's one of the great scripts. And the ending, people are still trying to figure out the ending. I put down, everything I could think of what the ending could be, and the DVD has an alternate ending. But, in some ways, if you've gotten that far in the movie, and I don't think anybody walked out on it, it doesn't really matter. And the thing that was disturbing at the time, a lot of people thought it was a romantic thing between the two women. And it really was like they've come this far, and they're going to go until they can't go anymore.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to have the car go right out of frame.
Mm.
This, if it stopped, there was the possibility of that hearing a crash. But that's what he did, and I think it left everybody leaving the theater wondering, what the hell?
Yeah. And that always puzzles me because when I watched it, I'm sure you felt the same way. I mean, I knew what it was indicating. It was indicating that they jumped the car over the cliff and they ended it together in solidarity. But
they put their hands on each other before they go out.
But it's interesting to me how people can have a different reading of that, because it seems obvious to me.
We could be here all week,
Yeah.
And, the other thing is that a lot of people. This has happened to me too, where you're looking at a movie and the ending. You say this should better be a good ending, and you don't like the ending. And you say, I don't like that movie. It had a lousy ending. But, movies you don't go to a movie for the ending, do you? You go for the process of it.
Yeah, you should.
But that is, it's also him discovering America. It's a road movie.
Mm-hmm.
The two ladies were fantastic. And what's that good-looking kid who's in it? Brad Pitt?
Close.
And he always, seriously, he, to this day, if you saw him on the street, we'd be lucky to see him on the street, he'd say, Ridley, give me my break.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He's a great eye for talent. Tell me
He
about
had the. I'm sorry, like Redford, he always had the looks, but he had the acting chops. They both had the acting chops. So a lot of people don't see it. Good-looking guy,
Yeah. Tell me about the movies that he turned down, because reading your book, I was unaware that he turned down movies like Dune and Point Break.
Now, Dune is a very specific story, very sad one. Dune, went through Jodorowsky, the El Topo guy. He got fired, I believe. And what happened was his oldest brother died, and he went to take care of what had to be taken care of, and he called in and said, "I can't do it," and he was like not in good shape for a very long time, and you could only wonder, what that film would have been like. I mean, talk about an eye and sets. I sort of liked the David Lynch one at the time. A lot of people liked the one that Storaro shot. The miniseries.
Right.
Now, the Point Break, I don't remember why he turned it down.
But it's interesting though.
Yeah, I like that movie actually.
I do too. But with Dune, it's interesting because we know what Dune turned into, David Lynch's film, and David Lynch kind of disowns the movie himself. Ridley Scott could have directed it, but instead, a little bit of time passed, and he directed Legend, which Legend feels like for Ridley Scott, it feels like the equivalent of Dune to David Lynch, because they were both these epic kind of science fiction efforts, and they really took a beating.
Legend I saw in the theater, and I was like hitting my head, and then later with doing the book years later, I realized that there's a long version of it. He cut it down himself, and he feels that he cut it down, too much.
Oh yeah, severely.
I think the thing with Point Break had a different title at the time, and he moved on to something else, and then Catherine Bigelow did it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks for going to get back to that. But Legend, I think, is another one that some people would say, "Oh my God," it would be last on their list, and some would be the first on their list.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest criticism, again, talk about looks and chops, is a very controversial figure, Tom Cruise, and I thought he was good at it. I thought the girl, Mia Sara, was wonderful.
Yeah.
And he showed him, as soon as he got off the plane, Tom Cruise, he showed him Truffaut's Wild Child, which is a black and white movie about a professor who took a kid like right out of the forest and taught him to be civilized. He does that a lot. Like Kubrick did that. A lot of great directors do that. They show their people. Scorsese, he shows you, as many movies as you could possibly watch.
That's interesting about The Wild Child. I didn't know that. That's a 1970 movie. That's it's Truffaut.
Truffaut.
Yeah.
Or director. But you see, the thing is, I don't know if anybody knew when Legend came out that it had been shown, it didn't get the highest numbers, and it cut down. And see, it's interesting. I don't want to get into psychological type stuff, Freudian stuff. Maybe he wanted not to destroy it, but he cut it down way past what he had to, and it didn't do well. Maybe he was angry at the critics. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to analyze him. But I like the long version. Is wonderful. Have you seen the long version?
I haven't. I didn't know it was available, actually.
Well, I talk. Sometimes DVDs go out of print, right?
Right.
I mean, I got mine quite a while ago.
Yeah, he cut it down to 80-something minutes.
Oh my God!
Wow.
That's like the 50s, right?
Is there a movie of his? I mean, that has been critically kind of ravaged that you think deserves another look?
That's a very good question. In some way, ravage is a strong word and a good word. Black Rain, I'm trying to think what kind of reviews it got. That film I like very much. I guess Someone to Watch Over Me. This I'm pretty alone. Usually Harriet and I, when we're doing it, we talk. She hates it. I may have mentioned that, but I love it. I think that takes a second look. See, the other thing is, movies should be timeless. Some are, and some aren't. And some, I taught for like 25 years at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and like Citizen Kane, that's great. But there are some movies you say you should see this, and they say, Vinny, this is like old-fashioned. I say, yeah, it was made 40 years ago, But don't you think it's a great movie? I really didn't, because what we know about life now and blah 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 blah. So the ravaging part, I would say mainly that. I guess I keep calling it the Getty film. I guess that should have gotten better reviews, or reviews that didn't just talk about Kevin Spacey.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned Citizen Kane. I mean, a movie like that, it just occurred to me. I guess today it almost feels like a movie that you no longer watch to enjoy. You watch to study it. And I think people have lost sight of just watching it and enjoying it. It almost
Wouldn't that be nice?
Almost feels like a homework assignment now.
I got one. 1492, Conquest of Paradise.
Okay, yeah.
The Columbus film. But see, that has become really problematic, especially now. Eventually they're going to not call it Columbus Day anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that film I thought was an epic. Again, the eye, the vistas, beautiful storytelling. Nobody talks about Ridley Scott as a storyteller, or that he has themes, or any of that. Just jumping around. Another one I like is White Squall.
The Jeff Bridges.
You know that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one with all the kids, with all the guys, the young guys. That was difficult to make because a lot of it. He shot some of it in the water and some of it in the tank, and he announced that he was not going to shoot anything in the tank, and he had to do some of it in the tank. It's the best tank work I've ever seen. If you look at an old movie and they're usually in the tank, the waves don't look in perspective with the ship.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look real. And in this film, it really look real. But and there's basically through most of the movie, really, there's only one woman in the film and another strong woman. And Jeff Bridges, I thought, was great.
Yeah. I know a lot of people love Kingdom of Heaven. They consider that his kind of discarded masterpiece.
Yeah. I think it's true. I tell you, even people who write books on film and film historians and all that, we're human, right?
Mm.
The Crusades is not my favorite topic. It's not to say that I don't recognize it as a great movie.
Yeah.
But the key villain, actually, I think I cut it out because I was running over pages. He looked like Ming the Merciless to me. Ming the Merciless from Flash Gordon.
Oh, right. Yes. That's true.
He was great, that guy. He was great. And the scenes at night. I mean, when Ridley Scott shoots at night, it's night. It's not day for night.
Yeah. I was watching last year. I rewatched Black Hawk Down. Thinking about this, I return to Ridley Scott movies all the time. And watching Black Hawk Down, I was just so amazed just by the job, the amount of work that must have been done.
It's amazing.
Yeah, incredible.
Amazing. See, that's another one that technically, the editing won the Oscar, I believe, and the staging. He was on the ground shooting, and it really, it's amazing. It's not one of my favorites in terms of the storytelling. It's sort of linear,
Yeah.
But again, if you had to like every topic, guys like us go to, and people who are going to hear this, go to a lot of movies.
Yeah.
I can't even count how many movies I've seen. So when I went to film school, I saw like 3 movies a day for 4 years.
Well, a great director can make you care about the topic, and
That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
But Black Hawk Down, I was watching, and you used the perfect word, the staging, because the thing is wall-to-wall combat. It never lets up, and I'm thinking, how do you stage these scenes with hundreds and hundreds of extras and make each one distinct so it doesn't feel like the same thing,
I know.
Brilliant, yeah.
And that's another thing he has in common with Kubrick, is the theme of war. He studied all of Kubrick's films. Paths of Glory, he did a short version of it, when he was young.
Yeah. Was that his short film that he made? No, that was The Experiment. Yeah. His short film was Bed, and what was the name of that?
Yeah, that Boy and Bicycle.
Boy and Bicycle, right. Okay.
Now that one, what's interesting? I'm sure you've seen like student films or first films of big directors, right? Scorsese is the most famous. He did a bunch of them. He did one called The Big Shave that
right.
You said, gee, I hope this guy makes it, man. I can't wait to see his films. And you could still see The Big Shave in it. Ridley Scott, this film, Boy and Bicycle, and Tony is in it. Have you seen it?
I haven't.
It's hard to see. Very hard to see. It was actually on one of the DVDs. I think the Duelist DVD, if I remember correctly. But it's like James Joyce. The writing is like James Joyce. And, I'm not so sure it's well shot, but I think it's one of the few, like Lucas that did an early version of THX. You can sort of see his, the films that he directed, and Terrence Malick. Several people have done, short films, and but in this case, it's very good. But there's no. I like using the term DNA. There's no Ridley Scott DNA in it. It's worth seeing. Very worth seeing. He also was a painter at that time. He was in painting school. Well,
and that was a good 14, 15 years before he made his... no, it wasn't. It was... his first movie was, what, 76? Or The Duelist was 77. So we're talking a good 12 years before he would actually make a feature.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, amazing.
And then he made a lot of commercials again. America, he actually, was... he's somebody who, all great film directors really want to be great film directors. But he could have still be making commercials and making a fortune even in his 80s,
Oh, yeah. And in the 80s, he could have made a fortune making music videos, too. Music videos weren't around during his commercial time.
That's right. He has a company, and his kids run it. The kids are not kids anymore, and they make music videos. But you think of directors that span no CG to CG. Scorsese is a perfect example. He's getting a little bit better at it, but I don't think it's his thing. He uses it because he has to. He's still a great director. Ridley, beautiful.
Yeah.
His CG work is great.
I'll tell you what I think about, though, what kind of makes me sad a bit. And I see the same thing with James Cameron, because James Cameron made these great muscular action movies, whether it was Aliens or True Lies or whatever. And now he's committed the rest of his life to directing Avatar movies. And I'm hoping that Ridley Scott doesn't do that with the Prometheus track that he's on.
Yeah. Well, he claims that he has several in mind. Yeah, the last one was not his best film. It was good. It was very good. But yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting. Let's take Cameron and go a step back. All those movies are great. Then he made this little movie, as they say. I think it won World Academy Award, Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that was a really bad joke. But anyway, Titanic. I finally got to the laugh. Titanic. I saw it in the theater. We saw it almost the theater was empty. It was like towards the end of the run, and we thought it was like great. Then I don't know. Some time went by. I saw it on television. Maybe it's because it was television. I don't think we even finished it. It was just too long, and who cares?
Yeah.
But
well,
the point is,
years ago when they released Avatar, he came on our show, and I asked him. I said, could you ever see yourself going back to like a more kind of intimate, less ambitious movie, like a character strictly for the characters? And he said, no, that doesn't interest me. He said, look, I build things that NASA uses to put on Mars. If I do a movie, it's got to be the impossibility of it that excites me, or else I'm not going to make a movie.
I know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I'll tell you something interesting. People were driving me crazy, about Eyes Wide Shut, with Kubrick. What is it going to be? And he had talked about doing a chamber piece, like a chamber music group.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking, I said, well, I think he's going to do for sex, for what he did for space for 2001, he's going to do for sex in this movie. And it turned out not quite that, but that was it was epic on some level, but it takes a lot of guts to establish yourself one way, big, and then, or small, big, and then go back to small and quiet.
It really does. Yeah.
It is. And I think Cameron is a tremendous talent. Supposedly he's a screamer, like Ridley was when he was younger, but he's gotten older, so maybe he's not. But that has nothing to do with his talent. He has a big vision, and so you think pretty much that he's going to ride out with Avatar movies?
I mean, 3 or 4 more movies, which he's already shot most of, I guess. But
he's between 65 and 70, right?
Oh yeah, he's up there.
Yeah, he's up there.
Ridley,
I'm a kid next to Ridley. Ridley just had his, what was he, 82? Something like that.
And he, a few years ago, he made in terms of pure entertainment, one of his best movies, which was The Martian. I mean, just purely entertaining that movie was.
It was very entertaining, and the whole idea, the whole concept was great. And what's interesting about when you do if you're doing a job as a biographer, you try to. Sometimes you can't read every novel, especially if there's a lot of them. But I did read The Martian in hardcover, and at first I said, this is more like not a comic book, but it was like line. It wasn't a lot of prose. But I said, this might make a good movie because, and then I saw the movie, and it's got the thing to pull in for the hero. He always wanted to do a Robinson Crusoe movie. So that's that.
It's got it's got a real punctuation on the comedy in it. He plays that up,
right.
Which is he's always wanted to do a Western. He's never done a Western.
No, I know.
Yeah.
No, and I'm blocking the name. It's a very strange book that it's mentioned in my book. I'm blocking it, and I read it. It's like one of the most strangest, disgusting westerns I ever read. It's like Cormac McCarthy. Well, that's another movie we should talk about. Cormac McCarthy. I don't know what it's worse than Cormac McCarthy because he said he wouldn't work with Cormac McCarthy early on, and he always wanted to do a Western, and he's not going to do this film. You could look it up. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of it. But I'm blocking it. I'm glad he didn't make it. But the one that we haven't talked about is The Counselor.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen. I'm not going to list them all, but I've seen The Wild Bunch. I've seen every what I call wild boy, violent movie you could think of. So we saw it at a local theater here, and I'm watching it, and there was hardly anybody there. The few people were there. By the time it was over, we were the only ones there. I had a hard time with the violence. For those listening to this who don't know the ending, I won't say. But what happens to Brad Pitt? I had my head down for a lot of it. You know what scene I mean, right?
Yeah. I know some people who love The Counselor, and I need to look at it again because I watched it in a preview before it opened, and I freely admit I did not get it. It felt so disjointed to me.
This brings up another thing. And there's different feelings about this. Some people say there's too much sex and nudity, in films. Ridley does not like it. He very rarely has nudity in his films. I thought that hurt this film. There is nudity with Cameron Diaz in the car. And I thought, I could be wrong, that was a stunt person, it wasn't her. Just at height and all that kind of stuff. But at the beginning, when they make love under the sheets, do you remember what scene I mean?
Yeah.
At the very beginning, I thought that was laughable.
Mm.
I mean, he should have started and get the hell out of it. I mean, it kept going on and on. What's the big deal showing a little nude? It'll show him nude, somebody, I'm sure the actors wouldn't have minded.
Well, that's not one of the things that he's most adept at.
No, he's not interested in it. I guess the point I'm making is I think sometimes it could hurt a film. It could help it or hurt it. There could be too much nudity, like is in a lot of movies now.
Yeah, I got two more questions for you.
Sure.
You've been so generous with me. I want to know your thoughts on Tony, because I feel because he worked in the popcorn kind of genre, the mass entertainment, that he is underappreciated. I find in many ways that he felt a lot like an avant-garde filmmaker. I mean, all the crazy things he tried with pacing and titles and all of that.
I thought he was great. I'll start by not telling the whole story, but I was at a pizza place when Kubrick died, and Harriet called there, and when I got there, she was standing outside and told me Kubrick had died, and I cried for hours. I'm trying to think that I think it came over the internet, or Harriet called me that Tony had died and he had committed suicide.
Mm.
You have to believe me, I have chills now while I'm talking to you. And, I've read the accounts back and forth and back. It will always haunt me. So, it's a kind of thing you say, well, what do you do in the book? Well, you got to stop the book. It doesn't stop, but you got to stop it. The guy's doing The Counselor. I don't know if there's a connection between suicide and that, but a really violent movie. I don't know how it affected him, but and then he goes, and I stopped the book to do a whole thing on Tony. So my feeling on Tony is that he was a master filmmaker. I think that I easily could have done a book on him. I think he's different than the people, I did Kubrick, Gus Van Sant, Scorsese, Ridley, but, he says rock and roll, people say popcorn movies. Those movies, this goes back to something we said earlier, they move. He says rock and roll, it's like power rock. I mean, it's like, they knock you on your you-know-what, and he really entertained people. He said his films, they're entertainment, people enjoy them, but they're not going to remember them. He said, my brother, forever, or as long as, they can. So I like his films very much. I think they were very entertaining. I think he has as much chops as his brother, very close, same, but he chose to do different movies. Now, why did he choose to do different movies? Because he didn't want to copy his brother? No, I don't think so. He said, you know what? Guess what? Brothers can be different people, right?
Different sensibility, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great word, a different sensibility. And he made, Top Gun, I'm not going to be foolish and say Top Gun is as good as Citizen Kane. But you know what? Maybe it's the Citizen Kane of action movies. I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I'm saying a good movie is a good movie. You shouldn't compare. You shouldn't say, well, Citizen Kane doesn't better than that.
Well, Top Gun changed movies in a big way.
Of course it did.
If for no other reason, because, it really brought us the Tom Cruise we know today, and Tom Cruise himself has changed movies in a big way. So, and I think of Man on Fire and just the bold stylistic choices he makes in that. And then I think Tony Scott went out on a really good movie with Unstoppable.
Yeah, yeah. And look at the Denzel movies.
Yeah.
What did he do, 5 with Denzel? 4 or 5?
Yeah. And when I heard about his suicide, I was confused at the time because it wasn't revealed why he would do it. But
later, Ridley Scott revealed that Tony had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a stranger thing to it. He said it's inexplicable. He'll never understand it because he actually was getting better.
Huh.
Who knows? I mean, suicide is like, I don't know what to say about it. Nobody knows. People think they know. They want to know, or they don't want to know. Well, either way, they can't figure it out. Or probably everybody has thought themselves in down moments of it. But to get in a car, write 2 letters, get in a car, drive all the way down.
Yeah.
This is an unpleasant subject. But
I always like to close my conversations on suicide.
Yeah, right, on a good note, on a high note. But it was very sad. And the saddest thing to all us film people is that there'll never be another film by him. I thought that about Kubrick, and
yeah. I
hope Ridley lives to 1,000.
And I know, there's a lot of filmmakers out there that are definitely inspired by Tony. I know that. My last question is about the book that you said you're working on now, which is the New Wave, the cinema of the 70s. That's a huge subject. What are you zeroing in on in that book? Well,
I think I've read, every one that came out. The Miskin book was one of the first. And, they seem to, most of them focus on the American New Wave. And again, in 1970, I was 20. So from 20 to 30, I went to all those movies. I saw them all. I saw Nashville in first run, Two-Lane Blacktop, even the last movie, the Dennis Hopper film.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, everybody was booing and screaming, and I said, this is sort of interesting. I like this movie. But what I wanted to do, everybody talks about what a great decade it was, and it was. But even films like The Poseidon Adventure and all these other films that were not New Wave films were innovative, were different than the 60s, and they set the tone and the mode of filmmaking that goes to the 80s, 90s, and now. So the way the book is structured is that it's, after an introduction, each chapter is a year. 1970, 1971. Nice. My favorite year, that's a good movie title. My favorite year is...
I got that joke.
You got it. I heard it. Is 1971. You talk about deaths, and I was talking about how they hit you. Harriet, I was looking at the computer, and Harriet said, oh, no. I said, what's the matter? She said, no. I said, what's the matter? She said, you're not going to believe who passed. I'm getting the chills again. Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
Hired Hand. Have you ever seen Hired Hand?
I have, years ago, yeah.
But 3 people, you, me, and someone else. Warren Oates is one of my favorite actors. That film is if it's not a masterpiece, it's a semi-masterpiece. In those days, in that decade, they went off the cliff.